last night, President Trump wrote on Truth Social that a whole civilization will die tonight and will never be brought back again. 12 hours later, he announced a ceasefire deal, 40 days. That is how long the war between the United States, Israel, and Iran lasted before a 2-week truce was announced on April 8th, brokered at the last hour by Pakistan. The deal came minutes before Trump's own deadline expired. He had threatened to destroy Iran's power plants, bridges, and infrastructure if no agreement was reached by 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Then, Pakistan's Prime Minister called Trump, asked him to hold off, and told him Iran was ready to negotiate. Trump agreed to pause, and the ceasefire was announced before the bombs fell. The moment it was announced, Iran declared a massive victory. Their Supreme National Security Council said, "The enemy has suffered an undeniable, historical, and crushing defeat." At the same time, the White House declared a capital V military victory. Defense Secretary Hegseth said Iran's military no longer poses a significant threat to the United States. Both cannot be right, and that gap between what the US is saying and what Iran is saying is where the next 40 days will be decided. The ceasefire is 2 weeks. The war is not over. Here is what we actually know. Iran will allow shipping through the Strait of Hormuz during the truce. Oil prices dropped 16% the moment the deal was announced. Markets soared. But even as the ceasefire took effect, Israeli warplanes struck more than 100 targets in Lebanon in 10 minutes, the largest wave of Israeli strikes since the war began. During a ceasefire, Israel's prime minister said the deal does not include Lebanon. Pakistan's prime minister said the deal includes all fronts. 2 announcements, the same ceasefire, opposite meanings. Iran's demands are on the table as a 10-point plan. They want sanctions lifted. They want US forces out of the Middle East. They want to keep enriching uranium. The US has agreed to none of that. Trump said Iran's 10-point proposal is a workable basis for negotiation. Then a version emerged saying Iran would keep enriching uranium. Trump called it fraudulent. Iran called it accurate. J.D. Vance described the agreement as a fragile truce on Wednesday. Fragile is diplomatic language for we do not know if this lasts the week. Negotiations begin in Islamabad on Friday. Here is the problem. The U.S. says the Strait of Hormuz must stay open and Iran must give up its nuclear program for the deal to hold. Iran says it will never give up enrichment. That is not a negotiation. That is a standoff with a 2-week timer. At least 2,706 people died in U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran since February 28th. Thousands more killed across Lebanon, the Gulf, and the wider region. The ceasefire does not address that. In Tehran, crowds gathered in the streets after the announcement. Some celebrated, some were shocked. Pro-government hardliners burned American and Israeli flags and screamed, "Death to compromisers." The government had spent 6 weeks telling its own people it would never accept a temporary ceasefire, and then it did. The hardliners feel betrayed. The moderates feel relieved. Iran is divided. Trump called it a big day for world peace. The Pope had called his civilization thread truly unacceptable just hours before. Pakistan brokered it. China was also involved. 2 weeks from now, one of 2 things happens. A lasting agreement begins to take shape, or the bombs resume,